Hi, welcome to my portfolio essay. A memorable year. With the hope of writing something to describe this phase of my life that I will most likely remember when I'm 60 years old, this past year is probably the most eventful and meaningful year ever since I was born. Since the arrival of COVID-19 last year and school was shut down in March, I was a little lost in life since it broke the lifestyle that I was used to for a long time. One of the lasting impacts of COVID-19 was that it changed my personality. Since I was little, I've always been known as the kid who wants to play all the time. During any typical weekend during the school year, the one thing that I looked forward to the the one thing that I looked forward to the most was the opportunity to go outside and entertain myself when I have finished all my homework. It can be anything from going to the amusement park to watching a movie at a movie theater. It became a habit of mine, so my parents would often ask me, "Tim, what do you want to do this weekend?" Ever since the pandemic started and people were asked to stay at home as much as possible, I eventually lost that opportunity. In the beginning of quarantine, I was not used to staying at home for a long period of time, especially when my mom used to be a doctor and she is extremely strict about staying clean and healthy, to which I haven't left the perimeter of my house for over a month. Eventually, I learned to control this desire to go outside, and I've noticed that I learned ways to use the extra time I had, both to enhance my productivity and to entertain myself. With AP exams coming up in June of 2020, I used the additional time to study on my own to make up for the less than ideal distance learning environment. As for entertainment, I slowly began to like watching movies, which I had never liked before, especially when I watched them at home. With all of these changes, I challenged myself in order to adapt to the new environment. This reminds me of Cheryl in Wild, in which she forced herself to go on this difficult trail and eventually found her own way of living. We both experienced pressure from the outside world and ourselves, and we both wanted to change in order to improve our life. A second aspect of last year that will probably last in my memory is the college application process, with education being the whole purpose of my mom and I moving to the US and separating with my dad for the past 6 years. Getting into a decent college is the number one priority for me last year. Part of the reason why many Chinese parents are so obsessed with their children getting into a good college is because the belief that knowledge changes your life, a traditional Chinese slogan that everyone knows about. Although my parents are not exactly like the type that I just mentioned, since they're more open-minded, I can still tell that they have high expectation of me, despite they never mention it. I definitely appreciate that my parents not wanting to put pressure on me since they believe that it's ultimately up to me on what I want to do with my life. But I hope I can present my gratitude toward them by getting into a good college and showing them that the effort of immigrating to a country that we're not familiar with just for education is not wasted. With that in mind, I began the stressful college application process as a student athlete that lasted until February of 2021. Although the result wasn't the most ideal, since I didn't get into the number one school on my list, I did manage to get into the second best school that I wanted to go, which I was satisfied with. My experience is some degree similar to Tara's experience in Educated. Although Tara didn't have the support from her family or a decent environment to grow up like I did, we both viewed education as the springboard that can help us achieve greater things later in life, and that is the main reason why I felt a strong connection with that book. Last but not least, turning 18 was another reason that made this past year really special. In the past 2 months after I became an adult, I suddenly realized that I am no longer the youngest group of people in the entire society. This shocking feeling first hit me when I thought that I'm about one fifth of the way done with my life. And this was the first time when I actually felt that time passed by quickly, which I never connected with that saying when I was young. Generational gap is another factor that made me feel that I'm no longer the youngest, in which I've noticed that kids that are now in elementary school already have a different childhood than the one I had, including their toys and what music they like. I used to not be able to understand my parents when they expressed that their music taste is different than mine. But now, looking from a different perspective, one that is no longer from a kid, I realized how much people can learn and change just from becoming older. Education and coming of age are two of the most important ways that can teach people how to view from different perspectives. And with that ability, oftentimes you can make the right decision and appreciate what you experience along the way. Just like what David Foster Wallace expressed in This Is Water. My last year in high school is by far the most memorable year ever in my life. It's both unusual and meaningful, and I will forever remember it. In just 1 year, I've experienced a severe pandemic. I've made my way into one of the top colleges that I wanted to go to, and I've become an adult. Thank you for listening.